Hello, my name is Ken Titmuss, and my subject today is why you should be implementing demand-driven materials requirements planning, or what is more commonly known as DDMRP. But prior to that, I want to introduce you to two very important people with regards to this subject. That's Carol Patak and Chad Smith. They are partners in the Demand-Driven Institute. And as you can see, they are quite prolific authors. And they've been developing and perfecting this methodology for the last 20 years. What problems are we having today with our current planning systems, which were developed 50 years ago, and we're still using them today? 50 years ago, we were living in a totally different world than we are today. So one of the major problems we've been finding is that we get what we call Bi-Modal distribution in our stock holding in our warehouses. So we have two universal points of inventory. A, here where we have nothing, or we have back orders, we're out of stock. And over here, point B, we really have just too much for what we really need at this moment in time. And when we go and look at warehouses, we find there's an enormous amount of material sitting down here, or a number of SKUs down here, where we're virtually got too little or out of stock. And then there's another lot of SKUs over this side here, where we really have too much, and we have very few items that are sitting in this optimal range here. Because this dotted line represents the return on the investment that you are making in your stock. And ideally, if we want all our items, if possible, to be sitting in this optimal range where we're going to get a maximum return on our investment. Down here, we're getting no return on investment. In fact, it's costing us money to expedite. And over here, we're not getting a return on the investment because we spent too much and we're just not getting a return. So this is a very unhappy situation to be in. And what makes matters worse is that when we run traditional MRP, we find that this flip-flops between one side and the other all the time. And most companies are reporting this type of result that they're getting from their traditional planning systems. The other major problem that we have is with the bullwhip effect. Now, the bullwhip effect has been with us, at least as far as I know, for 30 odd years, and there's been absolutely no way of stopping it going up and down our supply chain. So what happens, we get a very small change in demand down this end of the supply chain at the end item assembler, and as by the time we get up to the foundry here, with the demand signal, distortion is being transferred and amplified up the supply chain. The same thing happens coming down the supply chain. If we have a glitch at the foundry here, and he can't deliver the castings, then we could have a big problem down at the end item assembler here. So the more parts we have in the chain, the worse the effect is. And a true solution must deal with demand and supply distortion together. So DDMRP was first articulated in around 2011 when Carol and Chad authored the third edition of Orlikier's Materials Requirements Planning. Since then, they've written books specifically on this particular subject. So through innovation, critical planning needs are fused with mainstream improvement disciplines based on flow. So Carol says she's standing on the shoulders of giants. And we've had some great people doing some great work over the last few years. Orlikier with materials requirements planning, Ono, Toyota with just-in-time, and probably more recently Womack and Jones with lean, Eli Goldratt with theory of constraints, Six Sigma with Edward Deming. But taking the best out of these tools, some innovation, the Demand-Driven Institute has come up with a method to model, plan, and manage supply chains to protect and promote the flow of relevant information and materials. DDMRP uses strategic decoupling points to drive supply order generation and management through the supply chain. So we want to position materials correctly in the supply chain. We want to protect those positions, and we want to pull material from those positions. So there are 5 components of DDMRP, and the first one is that strategic decoupling putting material in the strategic points in the supply chain. Secondly, we have buffer profiles and levels. We need to protect that position by setting up the buffers correctly. Thirdly, we need to dynamically adjust them. Fourthly, we need to then do the demand-driven planning. And fifth, we want to have visible and collaborative execution. So if we look at the first component of DDMRP, it's about strategic decoupling. And if we go back to our supply chain that we looked at earlier, if we decide to buffer stock at this particular point in the supply chain, what happens is that demand signal distortion and amplification stops dead when we hit the buffer. Yes, it starts up again. And the same thing happens as we come down with the supply continuity variability. As soon as it hits that buffer, it stops and it carries on again until it hits the next buffer. So planning horizons are also shortened and the lead times are compressed as well. Component two of DDMRP is to protect. So we want to set up buffer profiles, we want to set up buffers to stop the transference of this variability up and down our supply chain. And we haven't got time today to go into how we do this, but we have plenty of workshops and certification programs that tell you how to do that. So the critical difference between what we've been doing in the past and now is MRP was not designed to manage stock positions. It was designed to be the most perfect make-to-order calculator. Also, MRP nets to zero, whereas DDMRP never nets to zero. There should always be availability in your buffers. Number three is protect. We need dynamic buffer adjustment. So what happens, and you don't have to do anything, this is totally automatic, as things like the average daily usage change, and you can see here on the right-hand side, this is the ADU, it's gone from about 10 up to about 50 over a period of time. You can see how the buffer has expanded automatically. There was a little drop off on demand here and it fell back a little bit, then it climbed up again and currently it's dropping down again. So this is just totally automatic. You don't have to do anything about it. However, we do have the ability to put in manual demand adjusted factors as well. And here we might have fairly significant seasonal demand and we want to pull the buffers up and then pull them back down again afterwards. And there are a number of different ways in which we can do adjustments. So the critical difference here is that most conventional safety stock and reorder point positions are static and not dynamic, which they should be. Fourthly, we need to then do the planning. And here we have a totally unique equation called the net flow equation. I think if you think about it, every planner every day is looking at what is coming to me. If it's a purchase order, he's looking in the purchase order files. If it's a manufacturing item, he's looking in the factory to see what's coming. He also needs to know what he has in the warehouse. So what's the on-hand balance in the warehouse? Also, we need to understand what demand do I need to fulfill immediately. In other words, what do I need to ship out today or what is going to get used today? And do I see any major spikes or major demands in the future that I might need to take into account? So buffer status and supply order generation occurs through a daily application of this net flow equation. And the equation is, what have I got on hand? What's coming into me? What's on open supply minus any qualified sales order demand, which is that what do I ship today, in the past, or do I have any relevant future demands I need to take into account? This then gives me a figure, and if that net flow position puts me below the green zone, i.e. in the yellow zone or the red zone, then I simply get a supply order recommendation up to the top of the green zone. It's as simple as that. But we also have execution capabilities with DDMRP. And the critical difference here is that MRP, or traditional planning, works on priority by due date. DDMRP works on priority by buffer status. In other words, if I ask you the question, would you prefer to have a supplier deliver on time according to the order or never stock you out? Then the correct answer is, I don't never want to be stocked out. So if we look on the left-hand side here, you can see there are a number of orders and they have a due date. Well, there's one here which is a make to order for Supertech. So yeah, I'd probably make that one first because I can ship it, invoice it, and get some money for it. The other orders tend to be make to stock orders. So we're filling up stock in the warehouse and they have due dates on them. And I see I have two on May the 12th here, one on the 14th, one on the 16th. But which one do I make first of these 12? Does it matter? Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But in DDMRP execution, this is the view we will see. We see status. We see buffer status. So yes, the manufacturing order for Supertech I'd make first, but then I can see this manufacturing order only has 12% of its buffer. It's getting very low on its on-hand balance. And that was only due on the 14th. So I'm going to make that one first. Then I'll make this second one here. It's got 27% of the buffer. And then these two yellow ones. So we want to say goodbye to this Bi-Modal distribution. And we want to try and get the majority of our SKUs sitting in this optimal range here. Yes, there will be some out on the left-hand side and the right-hand side here. And this is where we focus on the tails. We ask ourselves the question, why is this SKU sitting out here? Why is it sitting down here? What do I need to do to get it more into my optimal range? So DDMRP is proven to allow companies to plan and execute in the optimal range at strategic chosen points. So what are the sort of benefits that people are getting from implementing DDMRP? Definitely improve customer service. Users consistently achieve 97 to 100% on-time fill rates. Lead time compression in excess, in some cases, of 80%. Right-sized inventory. Typically, inventory reductions of 30 to 40, 45%. Most people have too much inventory. Okay, so we can reduce inventory and we can increase customer service levels at the same time. But also, probably more importantly, we're looking at lowest total costs, supply chain costs. So we're eliminating or reducing to a great extent these fast freight orders coming in, partial shipments, cross shipments, schedule break-ins, all costs that are a total waste and we need to try and reduce or get rid of them totally. Easy and intuitive. Planners see priorities instead of constantly fighting the conflicting messages of MRP. But that's only a small part of the picture. What I've been talking about is the buffers here. But if you've got a complex manufacturing system, then you might want to look at time buffers and capacity buffers as well in your operating model. So instead of having a master schedule driving the operations, we have master settings or a model configuration. And we look at the feedback, we look at variance analysis. How stable is my model? How responsive is my model? How fast is my model working? And we continuously on a daily basis looking at this model and saying, how can I make it better? This model is being driven by actual demand, not forecasts. At this point, this is where we bring our forecasts into the demand-driven S&OP process here, because what I want to do is to take my operating model and project it forwards using the forecasts to see how the model is going to change based on how I think the demand in my business is going to change. So we have this continuous feedback up and down our supply chains, from strategy through tactics, through operations, and then back through tactics, and then back to strategy again. Of course, strategy being driven by market-driven innovations. If you want to know more about this demand-driven adaptive enterprise model, then this is the book to go and get. So I would suggest that when you get a chance, go to the Demand Driven Institute website. It's demanddriveninstitute.com. Sign up. They just need your email address and a password. and you will get access into a greater portion of the website, particularly the on-demand portion here, where we have the Demand-Driven World conferences and the papers and the presentations. You can go and look at those. There are 6 webinars that Carol and Chad recently put together about the whole demand-driven adaptive enterprise. I suggest you go and have a look at those. If you're interested in education in the demand-driven planner or the demand-driven leader courses, you'll find the information there. Under resources here, you'll find a lot more case studies, videos, articles, etc. And if you're interested in software, then what the DDI does is it lists compliant software, software that adheres to the methodology. So, recommended research and actions. This is what I suggest you do. If you want to learn more, go to the Demand-Driven Institute, as I said, sign up and review some case studies. Access demandDrivenTech.com, review some software options. Plus, there are a lot more case studies on that website as well. I've also got a YouTube channel with lots of short DDMRP videos on there. Also on LinkedIn, you'll find a lot of information on DDMRP. You can join the groups. And preferably attend a demand-driven planner course, 2-day certification course. And you'll need to buy this book. If you do buy this book, make sure you get the 3rd edition. It's printed in color, which I think you probably appreciate is fairly important as far as DDMRP is concerned. And then if you need to, contact me for any more information, DDI courses, DDMRP systems implementation, etc. So good luck on your demand-driven journey, and I'd like to know whether we have any questions.